Okay, there we go. Great. So we're going to move into the second sequence for the hips. I'll just move back a little bit. Okay. And I'd like us to start actually with a lying down hip opener. So you're going to bring the bolster crossways. And we've done this before. Something for the head, like I like to have quite a bit of support for the head. And then the roll goes underneath the tips of the shoulder blades. So it goes fairly not into the lower back, not right up into the upper back, but just below the upper back. And then we're going to come down into this position where we let the hips open or the pelvis open. Okay, so it's, and then we can take the arms wide like that. That's it, that's great. And then we can close the eyes. And we're just going to have a few moments to tune in with our experience this morning. So yeah, I mean, I definitely could feel the legs and the hips all day yesterday and this morning, which is actually great. You know, it feels like they've been worked. So we're going to go back into it. So I almost thought, we could do the same sequence, but it feels like that wouldn't be the right thing to do because it would be good to give you a bit more variety. So we are going to be working in a similar way, but I've tried to pick a different sequence. Okay, it's just slightly different poses, but they're going to work again into the pelvis. Okay, so we'll spend a few moments just tuning in with the sensations associated with this pose. If it's really intense for the inner legs, you can always prop up the outer legs with cushions or blocks, okay? So they're not just floating into space. That would make a softer version of this pose. And also if you want to go for more of an opening through the upper spine, you could actually lower the head. So you could have the head going back more strongly, which will give more of an extension to the upper spine and the neck even. So it's up to you. I quite like to have the head fairly lifted just for my own body, but you could explore taking the head down to the floor. And the sensation should be fairly clear as well across the upper back, chest area. Sense of opening, stretching, like the inner face, the anterior spine. We're opening. And allowing the arms to be heavy. We're going to spend a few minutes in this pose, okay? So it's a symmetrical pose. We're working through the body in a balanced way, both sides at the same time. Noticing, clocking where the sensations are specifically in this pose. Are they predominantly in the groin area? Or do you notice something happening around the sacral iliac area, which is possible? That area has been lightly compressed. If we open the front of the pelvis, we close the back of the pelvis. And vice versa. And there's a gentle extension through the whole spine, from the pelvis all the way to the base of the skull. And then tuning in with the whole body, sense of the whole body. When we're aware of the whole body, this global awareness, aware of the space that we're in. Okay, so aware of the light, the temperature of the room, the sense of feeling the room through your body. Get a sense also of the atmosphere of the room. It's quiet or noisy or agitated. Maybe even a sense of the smell of the room. Any sounds coming in. And aware of the whole body situated in that space. So as we are, each of us are in our own space, connecting through the internet. So there is a sense of being together, even though we're physically separated. And then moving into a sense of how you feel this morning, sense of your emotions. So we'll do like an inquiry in that sense of just asking ourselves how we are, getting a sense of how we are. Here we can bring in a sense of kind, accepting, gentle embracing, even if the experience is uncomfortable or difficult or frustrating. See if you can just be with that which is there right now. And then being aware of this fourth aspect of Satipatthana, that we're focusing on mindfulness, the aspect of change, flux. So it can be really helpful to see your experience as one of constant change. It can help us to, as it were, unstick from particular states of mind or particular states of being or even particular physical processes. If we start to view the body through the lens of change, so our experience is changing. It can also be a little disconcerting, being aware that nothing is fixed. So we can take that on board as much or as little as we see appropriate. So aware that we're living in a dynamic process. Life itself is a dynamic process. Coming into then the breath. We're going to anchor into the breath. So the breath is going to be somehow affected by this pose. May feel somehow more tighter around the diaphragm or the upper back. Feels like you're working into that area. So being aware of the belly rising and falling. Okay, and then from there, very gradually bringing one leg up. So the sole of the feet comes to the floor, the other leg. And rather than sitting up, which would be a little bit abrupt for the body, I suggest you slide. You need to lift the head a little bit, but you slide off your support down towards your feet and then push the support away from the head and come into semi-supine for a moment. So the spine comes into a more, as it were, normal position, more neutral. And just being aware of the echo of the pose there, perhaps across the ribs, into the hips, the groins, wherever you can feel that. And then we're going to roll to one side. Okay. And we're going to rearrange the support now lengthways. So you could have a line of bricks. Again, I like to lift the head a little bit higher. So I'm going to bring this. We're going to do this pose twice. It's called the they call it the saddle in yin yoga. What I suggest we're going to do though, we're going to do one side and then the other side. So we bend up one leg. Just get a little bit more of me. That's it. So one leg is, the knee is bent up, the other leg is bent straight back. And it's really important, as we know, that the foot just goes straight back, not turn out. This is really, as we know, is terrible for the knee. I mean, that's useful for you, Saskia, just in terms of when you start teaching people, you really don't want to be putting twist into the knee joint. So if you have the foot straight back, there's no twisting, the knee is basically a hinge. Okay, and then we're gonna lower ourselves back and adjust again the head support. So actually, in this pose, I prefer to have the head lower. So it's intense on the foot arch, top of the foot. What's really obvious, the ankle. So this can be one of the issues with this pose. And then if you want to work more strongly through the spine, you can take the arms above the head, rest the arms above the head. But then you'll notice it in the thigh. So we're working the front of the hip flexor, stretching. It's a deep stretch into the hip joint. More so doing both legs at the same time, but we're going to do one and then we'll do the other. Okay. So we're coming into half saddle. Sense of your body being long along the support and the knee, shin, top of the foot grounded. So connecting with the specific sensations in this pose, in this shape, allowing the body to arrive little by little. You can release through the thigh, softening the thigh. Allow the stretch to soak down, penetrate down towards the bones. It's the image I quite like for these poses, the yin yoga work. In the sense we're working towards the bones and the ligaments. The ligaments connect bones together. So it's a relatively inelastic material, as we know. So it helps to have longer, slower stretches to give the ligaments time to respond. So we're doing this practice to maintain a basic level of flexibility and range of movement. We're not aiming to become hyper flexible. It's just to maintain, I think that's a more helpful way of viewing it, maintain healthy flexibility in the body. So due to aging process, we lose that flexibility, that elasticity. This is one way of regaining and maintaining. So coming into a whole body awareness, global awareness, feeling your body from head to fingertips to toes. Sense of the asymmetry of the pose as well. So you're feeling one side of the body quite different to the other side. Yeah. It's suggested to place the foot on the floor to help keep the pelvis level. As it were, the leg that you're not working, but you can extend that leg out if you prefer. So you could have your one leg long and the other leg folded. And then again, coming into a sense of how we are, sense of our mood. Saturday morning. How does it feel? Being in that weekend space. pelvis level, and then being aware of your experiences, one of flow or unfolding. And since we can observe and watch, as it were, be in, so it's like we're watching a river, but we're actually in the river, feeling that flow of changing experience, not as it were from a distance. So it's like you're in the river, as it were, bathing in your experience, one of change. And then coming back again into the breath, taking 3 more breaths here. And then from here, so there's 2 ways to come out. Really, if you're quite flexible, you can lift up the leg that you're working and sort of flick it out. But another way, perhaps more civilized way, would be to gently lift up using your hands. And then we're going to extend out the leg that we've just been working, making like an active lengthening, and then fold your opposite leg. So we switch sides. And noticing the difference between the 2 sides, dropping back into the pose on the opposite side. So noticing like the initial, as it were, impact of the pose. So you're going to notice that in the thigh and the ankle and the top of the foot, I would have thought. Checking that we're long through the body. You can extend the arms above the head. Usually it's better to rest the arms onto some support if you're doing that, rather than having, depends on your flexibility, but more than likely you're going to need some support underneath your arms, more or less the same height as the spine itself. And again, feeling into the asymmetry of the pose. Connecting in with your experience. So I'll just let you be in the pose now for a couple of minutes without talking too much. So exploring these 5 aspects of mindfulness, satipatthana, following your interest. So maybe you hook into a particular sensation. Maybe you're just more dwelling in a kindly appreciation of your mood. That's possible. Or at least touching in with your mood. Connecting with the breath. So it's up to you. I'll just let you guide your own mind and awareness. Sense of the pelvis level. So your other leg is neutral, just as it were, resting towards the vertical. We'll take 3 more breaths here. 3 more breaths. And again, from there, very carefully coming out. So remember, there's those 2 ways. If you've got the flexibility, you can usually just lift up the leg that we're working. But otherwise, carefully lifting out, coming up slowly. Okay, now we're going to come round and up to sitting. So extend your both legs for a moment forwards. Okay. And then we're going to do what's called square pose. We bring one leg across, as it were, the front edge of your space, and the other leg in front. It's got to be one of my least favorite poses, I have to say, but it really naturally falls into hip work. And it's like one of the 3 classic yin poses: square pose, shoelace, and swan. We didn't do this yesterday, so I'll just show you that way as well. So there's quite a bit of distance, right, between the sitting bones and the shins. We're looking to, as it were, be square, sitting bones to the shins. And then we're gonna gently lift up and then allow ourselves to release forwards, okay? And you're only gonna come forwards as much as your body allows, and you immediately will feel resistance around the hip joint and the femur. You can have your head floating into space, that's okay. But we can also do this thing of propping ourselves up, which I think is more conducive to resting. Certainly the neck and shoulders. And probably it's going to be less intense for your pelvis if your head is being supported. Okay, so we'll come into this side, just checking which shin is forwards. So it can be quite excruciating. It's that sense of both. It's like doing the swan pose, but on both hips at the same time. So yeah, not pushing into the pose, not going for really intensive sensations, backing off to a manageable level. This really will help create a sense of spaciousness in the hips, post-pose. So it is working around the head of the femur, but it's also working into the hip joint, but it's also working around sacral, iliac, sacrolumbar area as well. Effectively, we're doing a flexion of the spine here. So it's lengthening the muscles and the fibers in the posterior face of the spine that come off the spine into the sacral area. Connecting in with the sensations, be quite a dominant part of your experience here. Also the breath. Sense of softening with each exhale. So being aware if it is uncomfortable, yeah, it's like sometimes these poses can almost be like that sense of going to the dentist. You know, most of us don't like going to the dentist even to get the teeth cleaned. So just noticing if like resistance is coming up there, what you're going to do with that resistance if it's there in your practice. Do you start to fight with it? Is it possible to ease into the pose without fighting or pushing it away? Okay, and then from there, I'm sure we could stay longer, but we'll come up. And one way I quite like to change sides with this is drop back onto the elbows and extend the legs. So I'm supporting the back of my pelvis with the hands. And I'm just opening the back of the legs like this. You can even take the legs wide. And it's more like a toning exercise. You could even take one leg down. And we've done this, we started the famous fire series. It's just a contrasting work there of engaging the muscles around the hip joint. Okay, so we'll look a little bit more at that in a moment. So switch sides. It's another trip to the dentist, unfortunately, 2 short trips, one after another. Coming up, taking the arms up, lowering yourself down. Careful with the knee joint as well. So you may need to wriggle to be more comfortable around the knee joint or the ankles, okay? So the head can be hanging or it can be supported. So you will have, you know, in your classes, people will have very different responses to this pose. It's like really noticeable. Some people will go like completely flat. Those folks blessed with like very open hips. And then you'll have people that can barely fold the legs even into the cross, into the square shape and come forwards. So in that case, it might be interesting to offer something a bit gentler, like the thread the needle pose that we did yesterday. See if you can soften and broaden across the upper back and the neck, even though perhaps the predominant experience is the hip joint, even it might be one hip more than the other. See if you can soften the rest of the body, so a sense of global awareness, whole body awareness. Also being prepared to adjust the pose to allow yourself to come in more deeply for a few breaths, or being prepared to back off as well. So we're with these kind of poses, we're looking to work out what's the basic trajectory of the pose. So what's the point of the pose? What we're trying to do, and then within that, subtly adjusting. So we're not looking to get restless, moving around. The idea is to be fairly steady, to be still as we do the pose. But it may be appropriate to make small adjustments. Okay, from there. Coming up again, slowly restacking your spine. We're going to drop back onto the elbows. So I'm supporting the hips, back of the pelvis into the hands. Extend the legs up. That feels okay. The legs fairly towards the vertical, so I'm not really loading the hip joint. Then you can explore taking legs wider. Engaging the legs, straightening one leg down towards the floor. Obviously, that is going to bring some load into the hip joint. A couple of times on each side. Extending the legs up. Okay. And then from there, yes, so we're going to take the legs wide now, sitting. So we did this yesterday. So I thought as a variation, we could, rather than coming forwards, we come to one side, okay? So just as you might be aware, it might be useful to sit on the corner of a brick with this pose to get a little bit more a sense of forward movement, because it can feel that there's a lot of material getting in the way. There's all the inner thighs, the hip, the lower back, and then we'll turn. I'll just let you decide which way you go. Okay, turn to one side and gently lower yourself towards that side. So we're going to be emphasizing. We'll do shorter timings, but in both sides. Okay, rather than just coming straight forwards. As I said yesterday, I like to have the feet a little bit active. So Kashantika, we're doing like the wide legs, but turning to one side. And yeah, I personally just like to have a little bit of, as it were, active awareness, or awareness of keeping the feet actively towards the vertical. That's the way I like to do it. Okay, so in yin yoga, there is this idea of not doing any muscular effort at all. So it's up to you to explore that. But it somehow feels more okay for my pelvis to have a little bit of sense of the feet engaging towards the vertical. Not very much effort, just a sense of alignment there. Again, I'm supporting my head. It depends on your body, a bolster, block, or it could be floating into space. Being aware of the asymmetry of the pose. So it works across the lower spine in a slightly different way. Connecting in with your breathing. of what's happening in the body. So where are you feeling this pose? At back of the leg? Or do you feel something in the spine? The groins? Is it pleasant? Is it unpleasant? Okay, and then very slowly restacking, coming up to center, turning to the opposite side, and coming into the pose on the opposite side. So really observing the differences there between the left and the right side. So clearly, well, so far as my body's concerned, it really works more strongly into one of the legs. Obviously, the leg that we're weighting towards is more, it's getting more of a stretch in the back of that leg. Sense of the upper body turning gently towards the straight leg. Releasing around the shoulders and the neck and the face. So we're training our body to let go in this yoga practice. Gently conditioning the body to let go. And again, asking yourself, what's happening in this pose? Where do I feel the pose? Is it pleasant, unpleasant? Emotionally, what's happening? So this kind of practice is obviously a moment to be with yourself, with this added benefit in a sense of being with yourself with other people. So we are sharing this journey. That's really not to be forgotten. And then from here, gently coming back up towards the vertical. And so we are going to do a little bit of repetition. So I'd like us to bring the feet in, fold one leg underneath. This is the famous shoelace pose. I remember one of my first retreats, this woman came up to me about halfway through the retreat. You can't do those three poses again in the afternoon. So we are, yeah, there's a bit of repetition, okay, with the hip work. So I just, as a variation, I want us to tip to one side. So you could tip, I think it makes sense to tip to the side of the top leg, because the lower leg stays more anchored. So we're coming into a lateralized, if you can say that, shoelace pose. Sense of weight going down into the lower hip, the lower leg hip. And we're like leaning to one side, letting our body weight pull down there. Careful with the neck, so it may be appropriate to look more down here rather than to the side or to look up. So there's no strain. We don't want any strain in the neck area. And feeling so into what's happening in this pose. Obviously, we're working the side of the body to some extent. Again, if you're getting near to the floor, or you could bring the floor up onto a brick to rest the head into the hands. The idea with props, as I said yesterday, is to facilitate being in the pose. So generally the props are bringing the floor up or supporting a floating limb. So the pose is more, as it were, doable, more accessible. And then sometimes we can use props even, which we'll see a bit later today, just to do specific actions in the body. The prop itself becomes like a tool in that sense. Okay, from there, carefully coming back up. Wow, intense on the legs, on the hips, releasing round to the opposite side. Okay. And rearranging your legs as much as possible, interlacing. We'll see if both sides is different. So we'll start leaning out to the side. You can use your hand as a support. That would be the obvious prop, is the arm. And then just see what this feels like on this side, okay? Typically we have one side of the body tighter. Usually it's your more active side. You can also support the head into the hand. The gaze, I suggest, unless you're supporting the head, it's probably more comfortable to look down. So resting into this pose, so tuning in with the sensations, being aware of your experience as one of change, flux of flow, unfolding. A sense of keeping the lower leg hip really anchored, rooted down. I think one of the feelings in this pose, as it were, is this sense of being rooted through the sitting bones. Exploring the sensations around the hip joint or the side of the body, into the lower spine. Okay, and then from there, just noticing, yeah, the difference between the two sides coming up. Okay, wow. Any support will move out of the way. Releasing the legs, extend the legs forwards for a moment. Okay, so we are going to come into some leg stretching, but with the point of working the pelvis as well. So I suggest you lie down with, I quite like to, actually I like to use the bolster. So I'm going to bring the bolster right in to my side. So if you can't see that, but right in to my side. And then I want the strap. This is a really classic sequence. I've been doing this probably since I first started doing yoga. So it's, we take the strap across the sole of the foot. I like to take it more towards the balls of the toes, as it were, the base of the toes. You can do it more in the center of the foot or more towards the heel. But taking it towards the balls of the feet means that you then have to work the foot a little bit. The other leg, I suggest you keep the foot on the floor and then extend towards a straight leg. Okay, so we're going to straighten out the leg. The head on the floor, the neck long. And then taking the belt into the same hand as that side, same hand, same foot, and extend your other leg along the floor. Active, so the legs are active here. And then we aim for straight legs and we move this straight leg that's up out to the side. And it should meet the support. So it's not a really intensive hip opener, but the benefit of having the support also keeps the sense of the pelvis level. Okay. And extending through both legs active. Breathing now. Taking the leg back up to the vertical. We're going to switch hands and just take this leg a little bit across to the opposite side, but try and keep the pelvis still, as it were, flat on the floor. So the back of the pelvis flat on the floor. So both hips stay down as much as both sides of the sacrum stay down. So we're stretching into the side of the thigh to a certain extent. Like that band, sometimes called the ischial band, I think, tensor fascia lata. It comes off the outer hip and down to the outer knee. Okay, then releasing back to center. We'll switch sides. So if you're using the support, bring your gear over. Starting with the sole of the foot on the floor of the opposite leg. Moving towards a straight leg. So noticing the difference between the two sides, taking your time to work towards a straight leg and then the other leg along the floor, taking the belt into just one hand. So we're endeavoring to straighten the leg, even though it might not want to. So let's say I prefer the word straightening rather than straight. So we're moving towards a straightening leg. And then from here, moving into the lateral version, Pajva, Supta Pajva Padangosana, I think it's called. This is where the foot goes into the screen. Opening across the front of the pelvis, across the chest. If you can gently rotate the thigh outwards, external rotation of the lateral leg. Breathing, feeling the sensations around the hip. Is it different? Is it the same? Similar to the other side? And then coming back up to center. Slightly moving across the body, sense of moving across the body, but both sides of the pelvis evenly weighted down. So there's a sense of keeping that up leg, hip down. So the back of the sacrum feels like it's more or less evenly, both sides of the sacrum stay, as it were, glued down to back towards the floor. You could even bring your hand onto the hip just to help feel what's going on there. That's it. Exploring that stretch. So that's that ischial tibial band. Down the back of the leg and the side of the leg. And releasing. Back to center. Useful stretches to do regularly to keep the legs free, flexible, brings both soles of the feet onto the floor. And then we're going to take the feet now wider than the mat. The arms go into the T shape. This is like a moving pose. So you take both legs to one side with the exhale and inhale to center and exhale to the opposite side. So it's like we're scissoring the legs. So we do a lot of static long holds there. So it can end up creating a bit of a sense of, well, I wouldn't like to say rigidity, but there's a sense of quite hard energy somehow. Not those long static holds. So we bring a little bit of movement in now. Ironically, the static holds, like the yin static holds, create a lot of flexibility in the joints because we're working into the connective tissue, but the sensation can be one of being quite, obviously quite sort of a sense of being hard and still. So we're going to move now into more of a moving sequence for the next part of the session. So with the legs going from side to side, so as we inhale to center, exhale to one side, you can also turn the head the opposite way to the legs. So you could bring the head into this as well. Inhale, we're looking to center, the legs go up to center. Exhale, we go to the opposite side. Two or three more times on each side. Feeling, as it were, the fluidity of this movement. Because we're still working into the joints here. Like a different way of working. It's more like a mobilization. Gently engaging and releasing muscles. Coming back into center, recentering your feet more or less in line with your hips, coming into semi-supine. Okay, and bring your feet closer to your hips now. So we're going to do a dynamic bridge. So as you inhale, we lift the arms and the legs, well, the pelvis, shall I say, up. And as we exhale, We come down. So this is working into the hip flexor, lengthening the front of the hip. It's also working into the thighs, buttock area, gentle extension of the spine. Again, a dynamic movement. Bring a sense of fluidity into the body, flowing. Because we're going to make this a little bit more intense as we exhale, come all the way down and then gently lift up, looking through the legs. And then as you inhale, you go all the way down and back up again. So it's going to be a slightly faster movement. Exhale, coming down, looking through the legs. So we start to bring a little bit of tone into the front of the body. Inhale, down and up. Exhale, vertebra by vertebra, dropping down, lifting the head. So if it doesn't feel good on your neck, please keep the head down. So if that just creates more dizziness, Una, keep the head lower. Keep it on the floor. Lifting into the bridge on the inhale and a gentle curl up on the exhale. Do that 2 more times. This is working more through the abdominal area. Okay, and then coming back into stillness, coming into semi-supine, resting. The hands to your side or onto your body, the soles of the feet can be more, a little bit more separated from the pelvis, your feet in line with the hips, more or less. And yes, okay. So I'd like us to have any kind of block or cushion or brick. And we're going to place, I quite like to keep the front of the pelvis quite wide. So I'm actually placing my brick lengthways, but you could have it narrow, it's up to you. So we just gently grip it between the inner thighs. You could have a cushion now. So we're going to be working, so this is sometimes called core work, because you're working like this inner line of muscles close into your spine, including the abdominals, the inner thighs, and the sort of intrinsic muscles of the spine. So we're going to pick up the legs. So I have to say this comes straight from Pilates, which I did do many, many years ago. But a friend of ours, Pama Darshini, she used to use these a lot in her teaching. And they're really useful set of poses. So I'm floating the shins over the body, so I can feel the sacrum and lumbar feel comfortable. So the sacrum feels rooted. I'm not flattening the lumbar to the spine. Okay, so I have a little bit of arch there. So the lumbar spine has this lordosis, which means there should be a little bit of a gap between the spine and the floor. And you're already beginning to work here. And then we interlace the fingers around the back of the head. Sometimes this is taught to avoid people pulling up. We teach it where you just rest the tips of the fingers into the side of the head. It can all get a bit precise and particular, but you could work that way. If you know that you've got a tendency to pull up with the arms, then just very lightly rest the tips of the fingers on the side of the head. And then as you exhale, you pick up and look between the legs. Inhale, you rest down. So we're probably not going to want to do many of these, okay? 5 or 10. I'll just let you work at your own pace. What we don't want to do is what's called a pull-up. It's more like drawing up with the exhale and engaging from the lower belly to the front of the body. To draw up. I prefer to call it like a draw up rather than a pull up. So it's not pulling, because we could end up overworking the neck if you just use your arms. So it can even be done, sometimes I've seen this done where folks cross the forearms over the front of the body and do it that way. But again, careful with your neck. So maybe helpful just to support the weight of the head with one hand, but not pulling up. Yeah, does that make sense? So you're using the hand more as a head rest rather than a pull up. Okay, and then releasing down. Done a few of those, coming into semi-supine. Checking that your neck is free, so you can gently move the head from the left to right, not rapidly, not too slowly. Repositioning the brick or the cushion or whatever. Also, another little details you can bring to help have a sense of hugging into the center line. You bring your feet together. Okay, it's another detail. And then again, placing the hands to the sides of the head. So this involves turning. So you think about your left ribs going to the right thigh, come back down, and then the right ribs go to the left thigh, or vice versa. So as you exhale, the ribs come across. We're like turning from the rib area. Inhale back to center and switch. So again, we're not doing this. It's not about touching the elbow to the knee. You know, that might happen. It's more like lifting up and engaging those muscles that go across the front of the body. So we start to work transverse abdominals and the obliques, as they're called, alternating between one side and the other. So if it's strain on the neck, you could adapt this into a slightly softer movement. So what I'm doing is like reaching across with one hand, if you can see that, and keeping the head lower. It feels too strong on the neck. So I'm just making that a bit gentler. It's almost like you're reaching for that coffee cup that's over there. And softer movement, but still going in the direction of the pose. Coming into neutral, releasing down. So it's holding the legs there is work. Yeah, that's part of the practice of holding the legs floating over the floor. Emphasizing keeping the lumbar with its curve. Okay, so there's one more that I'd like to do, which is a bit more complex. Involves leg stretching as well. So we're going to leave the brick on the floor, place the fingertips between behind the head or just to the sides of the head, float the legs up now. So now you're keeping the legs more in line. If you really wanted to be sure, you could bring the inner legs together. So as you exhale, you extend one leg out and turn towards the folded leg. Inhale back into the neutral position. So I'll just do that again on the opposite side. Exhale, extend out, turn, and it's almost like there's a lot of leg movement in this, like cycling action in the legs. Some ways. Extending one leg out. Again, if it's too strong on your neck and head, keep the head down, and we could just extend one leg out and come back to central. The other leg out back to center. But if you want to go for the more intense version, turning towards the folded leg. Okay, coming back into neutral, relaxing down. So again, we can move, you know, I would do like sets of 5 or 10. You don't need to be doing 50 or 100 of those. That would really be obsessive. So like enough just to feel that you're beginning to tone that area around the hip joint, the lower belly, the rib cage. It'll create a sense of more solidity in that area, stability, which will feel good, as it were, on the inside. It's more about the feeling on the inside rather than being having a really toned, tight abdomen, which is a bit ridiculous. Okay, so we're looking to create strength, as it were, on the inside, with the benefit then of having more support and strength, stability for the lower spine and the pelvis, which is an area in a lot of people causes a lot of trouble. Pelvic lumbar area, you know, I think it's like 8 out of 10 people suffer from pain in that area at some point in their lives. So these poses will help with all of that. Okay. And from now, okay, so I just want to do one more. I wanted to do this yesterday. So this is just like a pure leg raise. So we're going to fold one leg into the body and interlace the fingers to weight the leg down towards the body. This is quite gentle. And then the other leg goes up to the vertical, going towards a straight leg. And then as you exhale, you lower the leg down. And as you inhale, back up. So we do this 5 or 10 times. Exhale down. Inhale up. Exhale down. Inhale up. Keeping the leg more or less straight. And releasing. Switch the hands across. And so the head stays on the floor here. You could do a version where you look down towards the foot at the end of the exhale. But I'm suggesting, yeah, you try that. That would be, but again, if it doesn't feel good on the neck, then don't do that. So the head could stay on the floor. We focus mainly on the leg raise. This is working the hip flexor. It's like toning and actually stretching as well, the muscles around that area as we come down. You're doing, I forget what they're called, but these stretches where you simultaneously contract and lengthen the muscles. So we're doing 5 or 10 with the breath. So personally, this set of movements has been really important in terms of really healing and strengthening the lower back area for me. I had to do them with a lot of care. Okay, then releasing into semi-supine. If it's possible, this is where we'll find out if we've got enough gear. What I'd like us to do is to bring, there's two options, is to bring 4 bricks together. If you've got the famous yoga bricks, okay? So you're gonna have to improvise. So I've got 4 here, which I'd like us to bring underneath. Oh, you can still hear me, right? Yeah, okay. So the bricks are coming underneath the sacrum, buttock area, and you can lift the chest and draw the shoulder blades back towards the bricks a bit, but we're not necessarily closing the shoulder blades together. Keep the tops of the shoulders broad, the neck free and long. So it should feel fairly safe for the neck. You know, if somebody's got serious neck issues, like I was talking to someone the other day who's got like 2 screws in the neck. Okay, you wouldn't give this to her to do, but for most people, this should feel fairly neutral for the neck. It's a flexion of the neck, so it's a safe way to come into an inversion. So we're going to take the legs up to the vertical to really, as a sort of rest the legs pose. So the inversions, even this really simple one, can have the effect of bringing sort of a sense of calmness into the body and into the pelvic area. It's like we've now got gravity working the opposite way on the joints. Okay, so most of the time obviously the body is bearing down onto the top of the legs. Now it's the legs bearing down onto the body. Legs are lighter. So it's a different experience, as it were, physically, mechanically, for the hip joint. Different perspective in that sense for the hip joint, to different experience. So we're looking to have the legs again towards straightening, but they're like back, they're not particularly active. They need to be a little bit active. And we're looking to balance the legs over the hips. So usually they're actually not completely in the vertical. They're probably slightly towards your head to accommodate the, as it were, lumbar pelvic leg connection. So it should, we're looking to have a quiet pose. So 4 bricks is too high, come down to 2 or 3. And as we know, we'll be aware of this pose as being also done against the wall. Viparita Karani, as it's sometimes called, against the walls. It's quiet leg rest. Tuning in with the breath. Someone once said to me that this is beneficial for the diaphragm. Gently toning the diaphragm, because if you just think about it, you've got the diaphragm now is pushing the organs. So normally it's pushing the organs down when we breathe in. Now it's gently pushing them even slightly upwards. So it gives the diaphragm something to a slightly different way of working. At the same time, it was said that the diaphragm is resting here, is getting a gentle kind of stretching crossways. So as you breathe in, as we know, the diaphragm tightens. drawing down towards the pelvis. And as we exhale, it releases. And as it will, falls more back up into the rib cage. Tuning in with the breath here. Checking that we're letting go in the neck and the arms. The legs, absolute minimal effort to keep them in the vertical, so you don't really to be really engaging strong legs. You do need to engage the legs though, otherwise they just collapse. Then from there, releasing one leg all the way down to the floor, releasing the other one, lifting the pelvis, taking the gear out of the way, coming into semi-supine, taking a pause there. Okay, and then last but not least, I'd like us to come back to a passive hip stretch. So we're going to get our bolster or equivalent along the mat. And we're going to now do the full saddle. Okay, so we sit between the feet. So, yeah, check that the ankles, this is strong on the ankles, this pose, yeah. Remember the feet going straight back. You can either sit onto the floor or onto the inner feet, or it may be helpful to sit onto a brick, okay? So if it's really intense. Anybody who's got a lot of restriction here is going to be sitting on more than one block, and then they're probably just going to lean back, just be aware of that, Saskia. If you're teaching people with tight thighs, they might just get to here at some point. And then you bring the floor up as much as you need to. You know, with some cases, you'll be bringing a really big pile of gear. Some people are just, you know, straight back to the floor. They got muscle fibers, connective tissue like butter, but most people are going to need some sort of support. Okay, and the knees can drift away from each other. That's okay. If you want a more intense pose, you bring the knees into the center line. You can even strap the knees, strap the thighs together, okay? And then again, with the arms, they can be resting down at your side, or if you've got enough gear, you support the folded arms above the head, so that will enhance the sense of the extension through the upper back. In fact, you'll feel it right down into the pelvis, even when we place the arms above the head, it intensifies the stretch, the whole body stretch. So we're going to close the eyes, so symmetrical pose. So you could stay in this for 20 minutes, no problem. You don't really need to be looking at the clock. I suppose ideally with the asymmetrical pose, you're doing more or less the same timing on each side. I have to confess that I generally do that fairly intuitively, so we may well be not precisely doing 3 minutes on each side. But with the symmetrical poses, there's less, just spend some time in it. That's it. So it's said to be, I just remember this phrase from that classic book, Light on Yoga, you know, of being that Iyengar used to give this to the cadets, young cadets in some military academy where he lived. So after they've been marching up and down all day. So it's, I guess it's with the idea that it's a release for the legs. So it helps to release the legs. It's a deep stretch into the thighs, into the hip flexor, which you'll feel it reaching down through the front of the pelvis, deep into the hip joint. This pose. Okay, so just for the last few moments in this pose, we're checking, scanning back through these 5 aspects. So where is the pose? Where do you feel the pose in the body? Where are the like dominant sensations? Coming into a whole body awareness, global awareness also of your body in space, physical space around you. So even if it's quite familiar, see if you can reconnect with it, as it were, from your yoga practice, even if it's a space that you spend a lot of hours, maybe you live, even sleep there, work there. You can reconnect with the space from the perspective of the yoga practice. Coming into a sense of your mood. Coming into sense of your experience as one of change. What does that mean? Your experience is constantly unfolding, evolving, developing, becoming. Then coming into the breath. Last 5 breaths here. And then again, to come out, so just, yeah, if you've got the flexibility, you can just flick the legs out, but more safe way of coming out is the way that you came in. So we bring the elbows down and we use them to, or the hands maybe behind the sacrum, just to lift up, push up, coming out slowly. This is where it's going to be appropriate to do briefly what I call the whale pose. So you bring the blocks or your bolster across your space and lay the pelvis on the bolster. So it lifts the sitting bones and will feel like a relief for the back of the legs and the back of the pelvis, sacrum. You can rest the forehead on the floor or the chin, or you can turn the head from one side to the other. Just a few breaths here, feeling the effect of saddle pose, Supta Virasana, the reclining hero's pose. And then from there, coming up into Shavasana, as it were, coming up and then going down. So, gosh, I'm turning into my Iyengar teacher. So we've only got 1 minute for doing Shavasana, but we'll do 5 minutes, okay? It is a bit cold in this room, I have to confess. And it is the morning. So lying around for 15 minutes doesn't feel like what I should be doing. But you feel free to stay there longer, okay? But if you are going to do 15-minute Shavasana, which is completely justified, in fact, it's recommended that we don't do 1 minute Shavasana, we do minimum of like 8 to 10 minutes. Ideally, from time to time, we do 20-minute Shavasanas. So you can just set a timer and do 20 minutes, for example, which is a really interesting practice to do. Otherwise, we're not training ourselves to slow down and to stop, which is, for most people is really difficult to do, to learn how to slow down and to stop, because we're generally very active, overstimulated. So we're coming to Shavasana. I've got support underneath my knees. And support back of the head. You could cover yourselves with a blanket, more clothes, more layers. So the point of Shavasana is really, it's like assimilation and rest and assimilation of all the work that we've done. As well as an important training in stopping and being still and learning to do nothing and to rest. You can soften your hands, soften your feet, releasing around the shoulders, releasing around the hips. So we're letting the limbs float away from the body. Sense of your head supported as well, head heavy. And allowing the back of the body to rest into the floor, feeling the space around you, the temperature of the room, any sounds, the light would have changed now. And Being aware of other people as well that you may be coming into contact with. You can hear around the building or outside. The sense of your breath. Okay, so I'm going to suggest you just stay there actually, unless you really want to get up. We've done like 5 minutes there, but you know, feel free to do another 10 minutes or so. Really beneficial. Obviously, if you've got to get on and do things, then you can start moving and roll to one side, moving the fingertips, up to you. Okay, so I'm gonna leave it there, and Salata will be back in at 3 o'clock your time, and we'll see each other this evening at 7 o'clock your time. Okay. Thank you very much. Farewell.